The world is made up of people with either killer instincts or without killer instincts.
Donald Trump, one of the most polarizing figures of our time, didn't just happen by accident. His upbringing and early life crafted a man who would stop at nothing to win. A man raised to be a killer and trained to never back down. Donald often describes his childhood as normal. But was it really? Behind that claim lies a far more complex reality. The Trump household in Queens, New York, wasn't just strict. It was a proving ground dominated by one man's towering presence: Fred Trump. Fred wasn't just a real estate mogul. He was obsessed with discipline, success, and the relentless pursuit of power. Fred Trump has been described as a machine, a relentless figure driven by an insatiable desire to win. His life philosophy revolved around a brutal principle: life is a zero-sum game. There's only one winner and everyone else is a loser. This wasn't just a business motto. It was the backbone of his entire worldview. And it was a belief he drilled into his children, a pressure that increasingly fell on Donald as the family dynamics shifted. Mary Trump, Donald's niece and a psychologist, put it bluntly: he didn't just have that philosophy in business, he ran his family that way. If you didn't win, you were nothing, you didn't matter, and losing meant you got crushed. Donald wasn't initially the heir to Fred's empire. That role was reserved for his older brother, Freddie. Freddie was everything Donald wasn't: gentle, empathetic, and well-liked. He had dreams that didn't involve cutthroat real estate deals. Instead, he wanted to become a pilot, soaring through the skies rather than battling it out on the ground. To Fred, this wasn't ambition. It was betrayal. Fred saw flying planes as a frivolous distraction, a waste of potential. He often mocked Freddie, saying things like, "What's the difference between what you do and driving a bus?" The sting of his father's disapproval hit hard, and Freddie struggled under the immense weight of those expectations. The relentless pressure eventually took its toll. Freddie turned to alcohol, trying to escape the crushing disappointment from his father and the realization that he couldn't live up to Fred's impossible standards. His life spiraled downward, leading to a tragic battle with alcoholism and ultimately his premature death at 42. Donald watched all of this unfold. He saw firsthand what happened to those who didn't live up to Fred's brutal demands. It was a lesson seared into his mind. Kindness and weakness led to ruin. To earn his father's approval, Donald knew he had to be everything Freddie wasn't. He had to be ruthless, aggressive, and willing to do whatever it took to win. Even as a child, Donald craved attention. He wasn't just a troublemaker, he was a force of chaos. Family stories describe him as the kid who would throw birthday cake at parties or knock over towers of blocks just to disrupt the fun. His antics might seem harmless now, but they were an early sign of his hunger for power and dominance. Academically, Donald struggled. He wasn't interested in being a model student, and his restless energy often got him into trouble. Fred, unimpressed by Donald's lack of discipline, decided that something had to change. His solution? Military school. For most kids, being sent to New York Military Academy would feel like a punishment. But for Donald Trump, it was a revelation. The strict environment, the hierarchy, the constant competition, it was everything he needed to thrive. Finally, there was a place where his aggressiveness was rewarded.
Clear. Fire in the hole!
At military school, Donald found structure and discipline that aligned perfectly with his personality. The school's reward system, with medals, ranks, and prizes, gave him something tangible to fight for. He loved the clarity of this world. Rules were meant to be enforced, and strength was celebrated. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming a cadet leader. His leadership style was described as authoritarian, ruling the dormitories with an iron fist. He thrived on the authority and control, relishing his newfound power. A famous photograph captures a young Donald leading a parade of cadets down Fifth Avenue, a symbol of his dominance and pride. Donald has often talked about military school as a rite of passage. It wasn't just discipline, it was a proving ground. He even recalls the first time someone slapped him in the face for stepping out of line, but instead of feeling defeated, he felt invigorated. He liked the accountability and the sense of authority that came with being in charge. Military school didn't break him, it shaped him. After graduating from military school, Donald returned to a family in turmoil. Freddie's decline had left a vacuum, and Donald was ready to fill it. He had absorbed his father's brutal philosophy and was prepared to prove his worth in the family business. Fred, who once doubted Donald, started to see in him the traits he valued: toughness and an unrelenting will to win. Donald had learned to never show weakness, a lesson that would define his career and public persona. Mary Trump offered a sobering insight. Donald was the tough guy, the killer my grandfather wanted. He never admitted mistakes and avoided kindness because, in Fred's world, those were unforgivable weaknesses. One of the defining moments of Donald's early career was meeting Roy Cohn, a lawyer infamous for his ruthless, no-holds-barred tactics. In 1973, the Trump Organization was embroiled in a high-stakes lawsuit. The federal government accused the company of racial discrimination, with damning evidence that black applicants were routinely denied housing. Fred's usual legal team advised settling, but Donald wanted to fight. It was at Le Club, a Manhattan hotspot, where Donald approached Roy Cohn. Cohn was everything Donald admired: unapologetically aggressive and willing to bend the rules to win. Cohn's advice was as blunt as it was brutal. Never admit guilt. Countersue. Attack. Deny everything. Donald was hooked, learning from Cohn a masterclass in controlling narratives and fighting dirty. Under Cohn's guidance, Donald countersued the Justice Department for $100 million. The lawsuit was more spectacle than substance, but it was a strategic move designed to dominate headlines. Although they eventually settled, Trump and Cohn spun the outcome as a victory. It was here that Donald learned a critical lesson: control the narrative and never back down from a fight. But Queens wasn't enough. Donald had his eyes set on Manhattan, the playground of the rich and powerful. With his father's fortune behind him and Roy Cohn's strategies in his arsenal, he made his move. He acquired a prime piece of real estate and began construction on what would become his most iconic building, Trump Tower. The road to building Trump Tower was far from easy. Donald exploited tax abatements intended for struggling neighborhoods and inflated the building's height by skipping floor numbers. His tactics were brazen and often criticized, but they worked. Trump Tower became a symbol of opulence and ambition, and Donald basked in the attention. Yet, despite his success, he remained an outsider to Manhattan's old money elite. They dismissed him as a brash, self-promoting developer, a man who didn't play by their rules. This rejection fueled Donald's resentment and intensified his desire to prove himself. By the late 1980s, Donald had become a household name. He was larger than life, a businessman who understood the power of image and media. But the 90s would test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. His empire, built on high-stakes deals and risky ventures, began to crumble under the weight of mounting debt. Trump faced a series of well-publicized financial disasters, including bankruptcies tied to his Atlantic City casinos and other real estate ventures. The press had a field day, documenting every misstep, but Donald knew how to turn even bad press into a strategic advantage. He famously said, "There's no such thing as bad publicity," and he lived by that mantra. Yet, through all the turmoil, he never let the public see him sweat. He continued to present himself as the ultimate dealmaker, even as he negotiated with banks to keep his empire afloat. By the early 2000s, he had weathered the storm and was ready for a new chapter. In 2004, that chapter arrived. The Apprentice was a reality TV show that cast him as a business titan, making life-changing decisions from his golden office.
"You're fired."
"You're fired" became a cultural catchphrase, and millions tuned in, captivated by the fantasy of Trump as an infallible business genius. What many didn't know was that his business ventures were still a mixed bag of successes and failures. But to Donald, perception was everything, and he played the role perfectly. Donald Trump was shaped by two powerful influences: a father who demanded toughness and success, and a mentor who taught him to fight dirty and control perception. From a young troublemaker to a ruthless businessman, every lesson he learned was about winning, never showing weakness, and always being on the offensive. His story is one of relentless ambition, forged in the fires of a brutal upbringing and refined in the art of combat, both literal and figurative. He wasn't just prepared to conquer New York, he was ready to make his mark on the world stage. Raised to be a killer, trained to never back down. If you enjoyed this look into the making of Donald Trump, be sure to subscribe for more compelling stories from the business world's most influential and controversial figures. Thanks for watching.